Now let's go to Chris Rufo, who has been enormously effective in actually delivering results, in exposing and in some cases putting a stop to the toxic doctrines of critical race theory and gender theory and other neo-Marxist projects, particularly in places like Florida. But now he has been named in a civil rights complaint because he apparently misgendered an academic who used ze pronouns, ze. Yes, the Biden administration's Department of Education has opened an investigation into the New College of Florida, where Ruffo is a member of the Board of Trustees. This is an example of the Biden administration really going after individuals who are fighting back against this agenda, whether it's someone like Chris Rufo, whether it's Elon Musk, who's getting some legal action at the moment, or whether it's the former president, Donald Trump.
So this is totally preposterous. I mean, it is facially absurd. I mean, no one should even take this seriously. You know, look, Rita, I have the privilege of knowing Chris personally. I've known him for a few years now. He is a wonderful person. He frankly is just a good human being, which despite his, what his detractors say about him, I mean, they can't take away from the fact that he's a wonderful husband and father and all of that. But the reason that the Biden administration is targeting him here, Rita, is very simple, is that Chris Rufo has emerged over the past few years as hands down one of the most effective right-wing activists in the United States of America. Yeah. He is possibly second to none when it comes to his skill at actually having sources on the inside, whether it is radical gender ideology of these so-called gender-affirming care clinics, whether it is these DEI bureaucracies that are instilling anti-Christian, anti-Jewish, anti-white sentiment all throughout corporate America, whether it is critical race theory, his bread and butter topic. So this is a very, very frank, straightforward and unambiguous use of crass political power of the Biden administration wielding power to try to punish its enemies within the arguable confines of the rule of law. I mean, right now they're just opening an Office of Civil Rights investigation within the Department of Education. We'll see if it amounts to anything concrete. I hate to say, I suspect it probably will. But whether it's Chris Rufo, whether it's Governor DeSantis, who appointed Chris to the Board of Trustees there at New College of Florida, Biden administration, time and time again, going back really to its first year in office, the year 2021, they have repeatedly shown that they are not just willing and able, but they are actually eager. They are frothing at the mouth. They are zealous in their desire to prosecute their enemies by any means necessary. And it really ought to be a wake-up call, frankly, for folks on our side as to what we are up against.
That's it. And you've got to fight in the same manner. I know a lot of conservatives find that a little bit distasteful that, you don't want to sink to those lows, but they're fighting a different game and they're playing by their own rules. And if you want to be polite about it, you're going to lose. Now, Josh, where you are right now, it's September 11 in America. In Australia, we've already gone to September 12, but I was reflecting yesterday on how much America has changed since that attack and how the magnitude of that awful day has been minimised in many ways. I mean, we've got the Vice President and others comparing January 6 riots to this coordinated terrorist attack that killed thousands.
Look, Rita, for me personally, I grew up in the New York area. I grew up in a town about 25 miles north of New York City, actually right on the Hudson River. And one of my really kind of coming to adulthood moments personally was being right there on the Hudson River on September 11, 2001, looking down the river and seeing the physical smoke from the towers. I mean, that was really kind of my impetus to start following current events, to start following politics, to develop kind of intellectual opinions in general. I mean, because once you see that level of visceral, shocking, unambiguous evil in the world, you are kind of immediately radicalized into being something of a conservative. But I guess that's kind of a talk for another day. The point is, having grown up there and lived there in New York, I literally remember the candlelight vigils trying to comfort people who lost their lives 3,000 Americans slain, the absolute worst terrorist attack in the history of the country. And Kamala Harris is trying to compare that to what? To Ashley Babbitt. And there was one Capitol Hill police officer who died of an unrelated cause a day or two after that. I mean, it's just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting, but it's actually very telling, Rita, and I'll tell you why. For years after 9/11, you saw regimes of both political parties, initially the Bush administration and then later the Obama administration, try to weaponize the surveillance state and the intelligence community apparatus against mostly foreign enemies. Then we saw it kind of then taken to be domestic enemies during the Trump campaign in 2016 with the FISA warrant on Carter Page and all of that. But what we now see happening with the persecution of the January 6th political prisoners, and this is really not so subtly, I think, what Kamala Harris is trying to do here. She's trying to take that same mentality of terrorism. As George W. Bush said, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. She's implicitly, really not so implicitly, pretty explicitly actually trying to make that same comparison to January 6th and basically saying if you are an enemy of our regime, if you are MAGA, if you are Trump, if you are vaguely right of center, then you are an enemy and you should be subject to the exact same sort of surveillance and who knows what else, political or legal persecution, as the United States engaged in for years and years after 9/11. It's a profoundly dangerous sentiment. I think back to Joe Biden's speech in Philadelphia around Labor Day, I think it was last September, just about a year ago or so, where he had this infamously polarizing speech. They don't care about unifying Americans, Rita. They're trying to make an enemy of all of us on the right.
Oh, yes, I remember that speech with the red background. It was very sinister indeed. Before I let you go, yesterday we saw the best player in the world, Novak Djokovic, triumph in the US Open. Let's have a quick look.
24 and counting. 24 and he still wants more. That's who he is.
But we can't forget, Josh, the way this man was treated by American authorities and right here in Australia. Here we locked him up in detention and then threw him out of the country. He's been robbed of the chance to win multiple Grand Slam events due to this COVID-era madness where he's been banned from competing because of his vaccination status. Tell me about the reaction to him and the fact that Moderna was the major sponsor for that event.
It's funny. I'm actually a lifelong tennis fan, so I watched the entire match. I watched a lot of this whole U.S. Open tournament, and I was watching it the other day, and my fiance walked in, and she was looking at the sponsors in the arena, and she had the same reaction. She saw Moderna, and my fiance, who's very opposed to the COVID vaccination regime, she was like, are you kidding me? Moderna is a sponsor of the U.S. Open? It really is bitterly ironic, right, that Moderna paid to sponsor a tournament that Novak Djokovic managed to win in prolific fashion. But ultimately, when all is said and done for Novak Djokovic's career, for Rafael Nadal's career, when we ultimately have that discussion as to who was the greatest tennis player of all time, was it Novak Djokovic, was it Rafael Nadal, was it Roger Federer, was it perhaps someone else? We're going to have a bit of an asterisk there and then talk about the fact that you're right, Novak Djokovic has been deprived of the opportunity to win multiple majors while he is still at the absolute peak, arguably the peak of all peaks, frankly, even though he's 36 years old or so, at the absolute peak of his career. He's been totally robbed of that opportunity. It's really terrible. Credit to Djokovic where credit is due. I mean, he hasn't made a huge fuss about it. He's got a very kind of work-minded guy, just go about, do your job. But at some point, you would like to think that the U.S. Tennis Association and its Aussie equivalent might give this man an apology. I fear that they probably will not do so, though.
Well, he definitely deserves an apology. I can tell you there's been a lot of rewriting of history here in Australia. A lot of the journalists who were absolutely vicious in their reporting on Novak. When he came here and won, they were all his biggest fans. It was all forgotten the way they really, I think, misrepresented what happened during that time. Josh Hammer, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Rita.